Hey, everybody. I wanted to share a few of my personal insights on diet and fasting and weight loss and that sort of thing. Um, I am making this specifically for our school group, which is extraordinarycourage.com or ectribe.com. Um, School is just a great platform to share training and community, all that sort of thing. So if you're watching anywhere else, come to extraordinarycourage.com and join us. It's a free group, a lot of good content there. So, I want to talk a bit about diet and fasting and exercise and fitness and that sort of thing. And um, I'll just be clear, it's not my specific field of expertise, but you know, I like biohacking and I thought I'd share a few of my insights with you. Um, my field of expertise is more, coaching people and emotional health and all that sort of thing. And that does actually play a huge role in fitness. So maybe we'll talk about that first. Sorry, I don't want to shine the light in your eyes here. Um, one, this is the important thing to understand. One of the greatest drivers in people's performance is to act in alignment with your identity. I'll repeat that again. One of the biggest drivers in people's performance is to act in alignment with your identity. And this plays a huge role in fitness and weight loss. Like if you may desperately want to be fit and skinny, but if you see yourself as someone who's lazy, with no self-control, who's just kind of a fat kid, you'll never get there. You might make progress, but the further you get away from your identity and your vision of yourself, there'll be something that will pull you back, right? It'll be super frustrating for you. So sometimes the biggest things you've got to do for to get in shape is to change your identity and start putting some points on the board. Outside of getting the right diet or the right coach or anything else. It's just like start making deposits in your personal integrity account. I heard a interview with the coaches of ABC's Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition, and they said, look, when we work with Bob, who's got 200 pounds to lose, the first thing we say is, hey man, look, here's what we want you to do this week. Just drink a quart of water more per day than you normally do. Bob laughs. Bob's like, well, of course I could do that, but that's not going to help me lose 200 pounds. And I'm like, how about you don't worry about that? Make a commitment and keep it. And so if you talk to Bob after he's lost 200 pounds and you go, hey, tell us about your experience, Bob's not going to say, I lost 200 pounds. Bob's going to say, I learned how to keep commitments to myself. Interesting. Great resource for installing new habits is a book called The Atomic Habits. Highly recommended. Okay. The other thing to explore is sometimes there's a very interesting, this is kind of a little more complex and nuanced thing, but sometimes there can be very important underlying energetic subconscious things. Because keep in mind, your subconscious mind runs your life, not your conscious mind. Okay. I'll give you a great example of this regarding fitness and weight loss. Years ago, my mom contacted me and she goes, can you help me around my emotions around losing 30 pounds? Because I want to, but I'm very disconnected from it. I'm like, you sure would love to. And we did a bunch of muscle testing for her, which is kind of a yes or no response from your subconscious. And long story short, we tracked down that the last time she had lost 30 pounds was the same year her mother and sister were killed by a drunk driver. Her brother was driving the car. He was seriously injured. She had to leave school, come home, attend a local community college, go to school full-time, work full-time, take care of her father and brother, and no one ever talked about it. And that was 60 years ago. And it created stress, which created 30 pounds of weight loss. So you fast forward 60 years and you go, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds. What does your subconscious say? Well, the people you care about have to die for you to lose 30 pounds. And no, we're not on board with that. So sometimes if you're just like, man, why am I so disconnected? Sometimes you got to explore this underlying trauma stuff, right? The next thing I would say is that I would very much avoid people who make blanket recommendations on diet and exercise and fitness. Like, oh, this is the right diet for everybody. Everybody should be vegan. Everybody should be carnivore. Everyone should be keto. It's like anyone who says that, I question on whether how many clients they've worked with. It's like, because people are so stunningly different in terms of what works for them, what foods actually work for them, different things like that. So be careful of people who make vast generalizations in terms of their recommendations to you. What worked for you one segment of your health and fitness might not work for you in another phase of your health and fitness. Okay, certainly for me, what my body needs at almost 55 to get in shape versus what it needed to get in shape in my mid-20s, very, very different. Okay, very, very different. So I will, having just told you not to follow any vast generalizations, I will make some generalizations. Don't you like that? And a few things I've learned along the way. One of the things I would tell you is that when you eat can be almost as important as what you eat. When you eat can be almost as important as what you eat. And under this, we'll put fasting in general and also intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting just means that you eat in a kind of a time restricted every day, right? And fasting in general means you don't eat for a couple days at a time, right? So there are some significant benefits to both of them. First of all, understand this, like overall health and longevity is so fundamentally connected to your insulin response, right? Man, and I hope I explained this properly. My wife always does a good job, but you know, your body can only handle so much circulating glucose or sugar in your blood, right? And if there's too much, it will try and stuff it into into your cells, okay? And sometimes your cells get full, and your insulin says, "No, you'll take it," and your cell's like, "No, I can't handle it." And you're when insulin starts to act like a bully, saying, "You will take it," and your cells start getting more and more resistant, man, you start having some significant health issues associated with that, okay? And so realize that the food we eat in terms of the carbs you eat and also how often you eat can really mess with that. Now, here's where another area where we're like, hey, you can't make blanket recommendations, okay? Charles Poliquin, who coached athletes to 17 or 18 Olympic medals, no, who coached athletes to Olympic medals in 18 different sports. Get that. The dude knew what he was talking about. He says it can vary widely. Some of my athletes do well on carbs. Others, I'm like, you know what? You can't even look at a carb. Why? Because everybody's different, right? So when people make vast generalized recommendations on carbs, take it with a grain of salt, okay? So back to the fasting thing. I became quite interested in fasting and intermittent fasting just because I'm like, man, I gotta like shift something here. And a lot of people were talking about it on different podcasts and everything. And I started noticing that people who weren't in their 20s anymore, but who I considered very fit, start talking a lot about this intermittent fasting and this fasting thing. So I tried it a couple times. I met a friend in Austin, and he said this to me. He goes, I used to be effortlessly fat. He goes, now I'm effortlessly fit. I go, well, what do you do? He goes, intermittent fasting every day. Because I fast completely for 24 hours once a week. And I have I call it my 10K diet. I go, what's that? He goes, I don't eat anything that wasn't around 10,000 years ago. Other than that, I just don't worry about it. And he does a lot of body weight exercise, calisthenics, things like that. Dude is freaky fit. I'm like, dang, I'm like, well, that makes sense. Obviously, it's working for him. And, I'm generally very impatient and lazy, so I would try it and it wouldn't work, and I tried it, wouldn't work. And I kind of gave up on it. Then again, I saw someone again say, man, this is one thing that really helps me, is this being really strict with intermittent fasting. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it again. But one thing I did is I muscle tested myself on what the benefits were and in what order it would happen. And for me, not a generalization, for me, those three things were improved digestion, reduction in inflammation, and fat loss. And for me, the fat loss was the last thing, and I was looking for it to be the first thing. But what I found when I started doing more intermittent fasting, that my digestion improved. I see a reduction in inflammation in my body, and then weeks later, I would start to lose body fat. So it's an interesting thing to keep in mind. So I also listened to a podcast by this one Indian researcher who did a lot of research on fasting and intermittent fasting. And one thing he said that made so much sense, he goes, your body is very much on a clock when the sun rises and sets, and what time of day it is, and everything's kind of on a clock, right? And he goes, think of your digestion as like a bunch of union workers, right? At a certain time of day, they're like, yeah, we're done. We're going home, right? So I found that to be true for myself, probably more so the older I get, if that makes sense. So the older I would get, I found that, man, after 6, if I ate something that my body would handle just fine at 4 o'clock, if I ate that same thing at 6:37, 8 o'clock, my body wouldn't handle it at all. Why? Because it simply wasn't digesting it properly. Does that make sense? So I found that to be very important for me, and that will change with different people. Also, women, depending on how healthy your endocrine system is, your age, and everything else like that. Also, there's different parameters around intermittent fasting for you. So you could, if you're curious about this, you could probably find a few specific podcasts. And if you ask some comments in the question about that, I can track it down for you. So specific podcasts where you'll get better insight on what women need to actually do for intermittent fasting. So there's a great resource, I think, on Netflix called Fasting or something like that. One of the researchers in that commented this. They said, if there was a drug that had as many benefits as intermittent fasting does, it would be the biggest selling drug in the world. You see things like fasting before doing standard therapy and chemotherapy, huge benefits, right? Benefits of autophagy, of getting rid of dead cells. I saw one research study that said if you fasted for 72 hours, the percentage decrease in potential cancer risk was absolutely stunning. So when you start fasting, one thing that happens is autophagy, where your body starts getting rid of old diseased cells that have problems. Huge benefit. So for both fasting and intermittent fasting, a couple things to keep in mind. One, it is a stressor on your nervous system. So if you do something like that, keep in mind you may have to really significantly increase being very proactive in relaxing, right? Also, you'll have to radically increase the amount of minerals you're uptaking. Okay. I love using something called LMNT. My friend Peter makes fun of me. He goes, "It's just expensive salt." I go, "I know, but it tastes good." And it's a electrolyte powder that I'll use. So when I do intermittent fasting, or when I do low carb in general, I really quite aggressive with this. I'll tell you one result I had with fasting and intermittent fasting. Sorry, I've got mosquitoes out here. I did 3 small meals in 13 days, and I lost 18 pounds. And it was easy. and I felt amazing and stayed off for quite a while. One thing I did during that time was I did something called a Huso sound therapy machine. It's a way to relax your nervous system, and I did that every single day, and I think that was a big part of me being able to stick to it. So I'll find personally, if I try a new diet or fasting or intermittent fasting, I've really got to be very much on the ball in terms of nervous system and relaxing. Or I'll be like, I'll be stressed, and my body will be like, you need carb, you need junk food, right? It's like I don't, but it pushes my nervous system enough, so it can be very hard to stick to it. So recently, that's one thing I did is I was um, quite deliberate in terms of doing something called an Opus sound bed. There's another gadget to relax while I really dialed back on my eating window and did some days of fasting and everything in general. So some suggestions that things to think about regarding food and macros. In general, I would say anything you can measure, you can improve. So I think it's good to track food and macros to really get a sense of what's going on, and weight. Of course, for some people, um, they can have a dangerous tendency towards kind of OCD level stuff with food and everything, and so that might not be a good idea for you. You might need to do more of a intuitive eating, something like that. Like my wife, diet wise, it's got to be fun, right? It's got to be fun and tasty, right? So there's Maria Emmerich, Emmerich. If you're looking for more low carb or carnivore, different things like that, I think she has some excellent books and support on that. So, in general, I would say this. Here's a generalization, something to think about. That protein, the amount of macros, protein is typically a goal. Fats and carbs are limits. Sometimes you can have a very high limit on fat, but again, this varies for everybody. For me right now, personally, even though I have the body type where I would typically do quite well on carbs in terms of body type and blood type, right now at 55, just not having eaten that well for too long, I actually really need to restrict my carbs, ideally for me. So that would be like 20 or 30 grams of carbs per day limit, which is quite low. But if I do that, I feel great, and I start to get fit. For me, so fats and limit carbs are limits. For me, I want to make sure that I'm eating enough fat to balance hormones, right? And for mental health. Also with fat, sometimes it can be really important to make sure you're digesting your fat. And if you're not digesting your fat, you might need to improve liver gallbladder health or take a fat enzyme. That can be quite dramatic. One indication that you're not digesting your fat is kind of weird, but your poop will float. Your poop will float because there's too much undigested fat in your poop. Okay, so in terms of food in general, I would say some people are quite passionate about being vegans. I think there can be, and this is just my opinion personally, right? I think there can be definitely some significant benefits to a vegan diet initially. I would be very careful in doing any diet for philosophical reasons or moral reasons. I find, again, this will be controversial statement. I find my healthiest clients, especially my unhealthiest, clients, especially in terms of nervous system or cognitive issues, tend to be vegans. That's just by experience over the years. If someone is doing a vegan diet and a big driver in it is they think is a moral, either for the saving the planet or animals, more of a moral choice. I find typically they will often ignore evidence that the diet is not actually working, and they'll just think they're doing it wrong. And so a lot of people, their health will really suffer in that. Again, that's controversial, but I'm willing to be controversial on that. But I do what works for you. If it's working for you, awesome. But be very clear on when it's working and not working. I know a lot of super smart, super disciplined people who really tried the vegan diet, did all of the right things, and it was not working. I would actually say that if someone has a lot of autoimmune disorders and inflammation, that again, this may seem controversial, but I'm definitely seeing it, that a carnivore diet is the most low inflammatory diet, and some people get crazy results. In terms of carnivore, here's some very basics, and you can research it yourself. There's levels for carnivore. Like level 1 is red meat, water, and salt, and that's it. Because some people their body is so inflamed and so sensitive to different foods that you really got to cut it back all the way to that until you start getting healthy. But a lot of huge amount of people out there are getting stunning life-changing results with that, especially with autoimmune disorders, inflammation, cognitive issues. There's quite a few doctors out there who are really healing a lot of issues with like mental health issues, schizophrenia, bipolar, different things like that, using a carnivore diet. So think about that. But that's level 1. Some people do differently on different degrees of it. Some people stay at level 1, and that's the only thing will work for them. Some people find, I like adding in fruits, different things like that. Sometimes honey, sometimes different things like that. In terms of dairy, sometimes people do keto and don't do well on it. Sometimes when they switch to a non-dairy keto, they do much better. Here's the general thing to understand, that pasteurized and homogenized dairy is some of the fundamentally most inflammatory, unhealthiest thing you can put in your body, because it's frankenfood that was never designed to go in your body ever at any stage in your life. Raw milk, whether goat or cow or anything like that, from a healthy animal, some of the healthiest stuff you can put in your body. And the vegans will go, it's for a baby. Exactly. That's why it's good for you. Right? Because if something is good for you at your most vulnerable, when you need the most easily digest, most concentrated nutrition, is certainly good for you at any stage of life. Anyways, so that's some information about that. In general, if you want to change your health through diet and exercise, it's best to find out what works best for you, right? And the way you want to do that is just have a vision. Have a vision of the desired end result, right? See it and feel it so clearly. Then in that vision, ask yourself, how come it was so easy for me to get here? How come it was so easy for me to get here? One of the things to understand is that here's kind of a joke, but it's also super serious. The number one suggestion I have for you in terms of get fit and healthy is simply move to Aspen, Colorado. Why? Because environment and associations will take you where you can't go on your own. And if you're in a town full of healthy people making healthy decisions and exercising, you're not going to be below average. So sometimes it takes creating an environment that will keep you accountable, that you will surround yourself with people making good decisions, a tribe of people. And ultimately, sometimes that's the most important thing, to change your health through diet and exercise and fitness. Anyways, hope this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions.